When you hear the word discipline, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, it conjures up images of raw willpower, of control, of an almost military-like rigidity. The popular view is that a disciplined person has this incredibly strong ego, this mental fortress that can master any impulse and bend life to its will. And because of this, we tend to see a lack of discipline, or indiscipline, as a weakness of character, maybe even a moral flaw. But let's be honest. If you look closely at your own life, at your own attempts to build habits and stay on track, you know it's not that simple. That explanation just doesn't hold water. Why is it that so many of us fail to stay disciplined, even when we're genuinely motivated and have crystal clear goals? Why do those healthy habits we start with so much enthusiasm just fade away after a few weeks, or maybe a couple of months? Why do goals that once felt so important and exciting start to feel like a heavy burden, something we can't bear to even think about? The answer isn't just about trying harder or having more willpower. The real answer lies deep within the hidden structures of our minds. See, depth psychology, particularly the work of Carl Jung, shows us that we aren't just governed by our conscious thoughts. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, there's this vast, powerful realm called the unconscious. It's home to desires, memories, fears, and ancient patterns or archetypes that operate completely on their own, far beyond our conscious control. Think of your conscious mind, what Jung called the ego, as the captain of a ship. The captain stands on the bridge, holding the wheel, thinking they're in complete control of the vessel's direction. But the unconscious is the massive engine room, the complex machinery, and the powerful ocean currents that the captain can't even see. The ego might want to steer north, but if the engine is failing or the currents are pulling south, the captain's willpower alone isn't going to get the ship to its destination. In fact, the captain often ignores or actively pushes away the reports from the engine room, and that's when things really start to go wrong. This is the true root of what we call indiscipline. It's not just laziness or a lack of effort. It's an invisible, internal conflict. It's a war between your conscious will, the part of you that says, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym, and these powerful unconscious forces that are operating on a completely different logic. When these deep conflicts aren't brought into the light, when they're not understood and resolved, they show up in our lives as roadblocks, as self-sabotage, and as that constant, draining feeling that you're always fighting against yourself. On top of all this, our modern culture pours gasoline on the fire. It pushes this relentless model of success and productivity. We're constantly told to build a perfect public image, what Jung called the persona. It's the social mask we wear to fit in, to be accepted, to look like we have it all together. Many of us try to maintain this image of perfect discipline and control to meet those external expectations. But internally, we're living a life completely disconnected from our own deep, authentic desires and needs, our true self. This gap between the mask you wear and who you really are creates an incredible amount of tension and psychic fatigue. It makes discipline feel artificial, like a performance you can only keep up for so long before you collapse from exhaustion. So, if you want to build true, solid, lasting discipline, you need more than just productivity hacks and willpower. It demands deep psychological work. It requires integrating those hidden parts of your unconscious, confronting your inner darkness, or shadow, aligning the mask you show the world with who you truly are, and creating a harmony within your psychic energy. Only when you achieve this kind of internal balance does discipline stop being a burden you have to carry and start becoming something that flows naturally from within you. Over the course of this video, we're going to explore the 7 psychological laws that will help you understand the deep mechanisms that either sustain or sabotage your discipline. These laws, based on the principles of analytical psychology, will reveal exactly why so many of us fail in our attempts to become more disciplined, and more importantly, how you can use this inner work to build a discipline that is truly unbreakable. It's so common to believe that with enough willpower, you can forge any habit, you can maintain any behavior. This belief is everywhere. It's in self-help books, it's in corporate performance training, it's in every motivational speech you've ever heard. But from the perspective of analytical psychology, this approach isn't just simplistic, it's basically doomed to fail. Why? Because the willpower of your ego doesn't operate in a vacuum. It has to work with the entire psychic system you've got. And that system is profoundly shaped by all that unconscious stuff we just talked about, the content you can't just ignore or crush into submission. The unconscious isn't a passive junk drawer for forgotten memories. It's a dynamic, active part of you. It's a field of autonomous forces, your deep desires, your unresolved issues or complexes, your archetypal patterns, that are constantly influencing your behavior, whether you realize it or not. Many of these forces have been rejected or repressed by your conscious mind because they didn't fit the good or acceptable image you wanted to have of yourself. But they don't go away. They just manifest in distorted ways, as sudden impulses, as mental slips, as physical symptoms, as this invisible resistance that just guts your conscious efforts. So, when you try to force discipline on yourself, without first dealing with these unconscious parts, you are literally setting yourself up for internal sabotage. You'll start to feel this growing tension, this fatigue you can't explain, a sudden baffling aversion to the very goals that once excited you. It's not that you don't want to be disciplined. It's that a part of you, a powerful, unconscious part, is resisting the command of your ego because it hasn't been heard, it hasn't been understood, and it certainly hasn't been integrated into the whole of who you are. And here's the kicker. The more you try to repress these forces, the more likely they are to erupt in completely uncontrolled ways. You try to force yourself to follow a rigid routine, a strict diet, an intense study schedule, a demanding work regimen. But then, out of nowhere, you find yourself completely overwhelmed by compulsions. You procrastinate for hours on end. You binge eat an entire pizza. You become irritable and snap at everyone. Or you even develop psychosomatic issues like headaches or stomach problems. These aren't just character flaws. They are distress signals. They are symptoms of an unresolved war between your conscious mind and your unconscious. True discipline, then, isn't built through force. It's built through integration. Before you even try to change your behavior, you have to do the inner work. You need to explore your hidden motivations. You need to understand the desires and fears that are operating in the shadows of your psyche. You have to be willing to meet the rejected parts of yourself and work to bring them back into the fold of your conscious personality. Only then will the will of your ego stop meeting so much resistance. Only then can it begin to flow in harmony with your entire psyche. Without this integration, any attempt to impose discipline will just lead to the same old cycles of effort and failure, of guilt and frustration. Your psychic energy will stay divided, consumed by this internal civil war, making every new habit feel like a battle. But when those unconscious forces are finally recognized and integrated, discipline stops being a constant struggle. It becomes natural. It becomes something sustained by an internal peace treaty between all the different parts of you. This is the first and most fundamental law for building an unbreakable discipline. But it's not the only one. There are even deeper forces at play, and one of the most powerful is the self-sabotage that comes directly from the parts of ourselves we've thrown away. Among all the sneaky phenomena that undermine our discipline, self-sabotage is probably the most insidious and confusing. It's not an external enemy. It's not your environment, or a lack of time, or a lack of resources. It's an internal, silent rebellion that seems to come out of nowhere. It's this invisible boycott that stops you from moving toward your own goals. From the outside, it looks completely irrational. But from the perspective of depth psychology, self-sabotage is anything but random. It is a direct expression of the rejected self. Think about it. Every single one of us carries parts of our psyche that we've repressed or denied over the course of our lives. These are desires we were taught were unacceptable, emotions we were told were forbidden, traumas we never fully processed. They are facets of our personality that just didn't fit in with what our family or society expected from us, so we locked them away in the basement of our unconscious. But here's the thing. These parts don't just die. They continue to exist, buzzing with psychic energy, and they are constantly looking for a way to express themselves and be seen. And one of the most common ways they do that is by sabotaging your discipline and your personal progress. When your ego tries to construct this idealized identity, this perfect, disciplined, productive, controlled version of you, it often does it by rejecting and ignoring these other essential parts. The result is a massive internal conflict. The rejected self refuses to be ignored. It acts as a counterweight, a compensating force. It brings up contrary impulses. It creates endless distractions. It generates self-destructive behaviors. It's not doing this out of malice. It's doing it as an unconscious, desperate attempt to restore your psychic balance. Therefore, the more rigid and forceful your effort to discipline yourself is, without integrating these lost parts, the more intense your self-sabotage is going to be. Here's a classic example. A person decides they're going to adopt an extreme productivity routine. They schedule every single minute of their day, from a 5 a.m. workout to late-night work sessions, completely denying their own fundamental needs for rest, for play, for pleasure, or for simple emotional connection. At first, they might actually pull it off for a little while, riding a wave of initial motivation. But gradually, the resistance starts to build. A profound laziness sets in. Procrastination becomes their new normal. They get drawn into compulsive distractions, social media, video games, anything to escape. They become irritable and lose their motivation entirely. This isn't a failure of willpower. This is the rejected self screaming for attention. It's claiming its space. And if that desperate cry is ignored, it will only get louder until it completely sabotages the entire project of discipline. So you see, a true and sustainable discipline can only be built on a foundation of reconciliation with your rejected self. This requires the inner work of recognizing and accepting these hidden parts of you. It means you have to be willing to embrace the aspects of your psyche that you've denied. You have to understand where they came from and give them a legitimate, respected place in your life. Only then can the energy that was once fueling your self-sabotage be redirected into something constructive. This is a delicate and often difficult process. It can't be solved with a few simple life hacks, but it is absolutely essential for anyone who wants a discipline that isn't a constant, exhausting battle against themselves. Because as long as your rejected self remains ignored and unintegrated, self-sabotage will continue to act, subtly, persistently, and inevitably. But there's an even deeper step on this journey. Even after you start to recognize your rejected self, you need to reach a level of psychological development where your discipline doesn't depend on constant effort at all. It needs to arise from an authentic alignment with your true self, and that is exactly what we will discuss in the next part. For a truly unbreakable will, the kind of discipline that feels less like a struggle and more like an authentic expression of who you are, You can't just rely on blind effort or suppressing your impulses. The real, deep foundation of discipline lies in a psychological process that Jung called individuation. Now, individuation is not your typical self-improvement concept. This isn't about becoming an ideal self or chasing some external model of success you saw on social media. This is something much deeper. It's the inner journey of recognizing, accepting, and integrating all the different parts of your psyche, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, the masculine and the feminine, the public mask and the true self. It's the process of becoming fully and completely you. Think about it. Most people live their lives in a state of constant internal conflict. The ego, your conscious mind, wants one thing. I want to build a successful business. But the unconscious wants something else entirely. Perhaps it craves security or fears failure. The persona, your social mask, demands a certain behavior. I must appear confident and always in control. But your authentic self, your deep inner core, is crying out for something else, something with more meaning. This internal fragmentation completely drains your psychic energy. It makes discipline feel like a constant, uphill battle in the mud. This is precisely why so many of our personal projects fail. It's not because we lack desire, it's because we lack internal coherence. We're a house divided against itself. But as you start to advance on the path of individuation, this entire dynamic begins to change. By integrating those repressed parts of yourself and dissolving the false identifications you have with your social mask, you start to experience a profound sense of internal harmony. Your psychic energy, which was once scattered and wasted on all these internal conflicts and resistances, begins to organize itself around a central, stable axis, your true self. When this happens, your will becomes more fluid, more consistent, more powerful. And discipline, it no longer requires this monumental, Herculean effort. It starts to become a natural expression of a psyche that is whole and integrated. It's like trying to drive a car with one foot on the gas and one on the brake versus driving with both feet working together to move you forward. Furthermore, the process of individuation brings an incredible clarity of purpose. So often, our lack of discipline comes from the simple fact that we are chasing goals that don't actually belong to us. They are goals imposed on us by society, our family, or the culture we live in. You should be a doctor. You should buy a house by 30. You should be an entrepreneur. This creates a massive disconnect between the superficial wanting of the ego and the deep, motivating forces of the psyche. The inevitable result is resistance, a lack of interest, and a deep, soul-crushing fatigue. Through the process of individuation, you learn to listen to yourself. You learn to distinguish between the authentic desires that come from your core and the external conditioning you've absorbed your whole life. As a result, you start to invest your precious energy in projects that truly, deeply make sense to you. And in those projects, you'll find that discipline flows with an ease you never thought possible. So, real discipline isn't about fighting against yourself. It is the natural fruit of a psyche that is more integrated, more coherent, and more aligned with its own deep center. And this can only be achieved through the journey of individuation. But even with this growing alignment, even as you start to feel more whole, there is one aspect of the psyche that, if it is not directly confronted, will continue to exert a powerful and hidden influence over your behavior. It's the source of our most destructive impulses and our most stubborn patterns of self-sabotage. It's the shadow. And as long as your shadow is not integrated, it will have the power to destroy even your most well-intentioned plans. This is precisely what we need to talk about now. In Jung's thinking, the concept of the shadow is absolutely central to understanding how the unconscious hijacks our lives. So, what is it? The shadow is composed of every single aspect of your psyche that your conscious ego rejects, denies, or represses. It's all the traits, the desires, the emotions, and the impulses that you consider unacceptable, shameful, or simply incompatible with the image you want to have of yourself. It's your anger, your envy, your greed, your laziness, your vulnerability. Anything you've decided is not me. But here's the crucial part. Just because you reject these parts doesn't mean they disappear. On the contrary, the more you shove them down into the darkness of your unconscious, the more power they secretly acquire. And it is right here that we find one of the greatest obstacles to building true, lasting discipline. As long as your shadow remains unrecognized and unintegrated, it acts on its own, like a rogue agent, constantly sabotaging your conscious intentions. The shadow is the force behind many of your impulses to escape, to seek distraction, and to indulge in compulsive behaviors. It's the fuel for your patterns of procrastination, your addictions, and your completely disproportionate emotional reactions. It doesn't matter how much your ego tries to be in control. If your shadow has not been confronted, it will find a way to manifest. The problem is that most of us live in complete denial of our own shadow. We cling desperately to an idealized image of ourselves, an image that is reinforced by our persona, that social mask we present to the world. In this perfect, curated image, there's no room for weakness. There's no room for desires we consider to be inferior. There's no room for dark impulses. But the price for this repression is incredibly high. The psychic energy of the shadow, which has been locked out of your conscious life, accumulates in the unconscious like pressure building in a volcanic chamber. This creates a massive internal tension, and the greater this tension becomes, the more uncontrollable and impulsive your behavior gets. In the context of discipline, this means that as long as you refuse to take responsibility for your own shadow, you will continue to be ambushed by behaviors that completely contradict your conscious will. For example, you decide to adopt a rigorous work routine. You're motivated, you have a plan, but you find that in moments of stress, you repeatedly give in to the hunt for immediate gratification, mindless scrolling, binge-watching a series, comfort eating. Or maybe you try to maintain a disciplined workout regimen, but you constantly sabotage your own efforts with flimsy excuses and endless delays. These behaviors are not simply a lack of willpower. They are expressions of your unintegrated shadow, which is desperately seeking a way to be seen and heard. Now, integrating the shadow does not mean eliminating these parts of yourself or trying to purify them. And it certainly doesn't mean you should just act out every dark impulse you have. It means you have to recognize them, understand them, and accept them as legitimate parts of the whole you. It's a process of profound self-knowledge that requires immense courage and brutal honesty. When you do this work, when you turn around and face your own darkness, you begin to reduce its unconscious power. The energies that were previously wasted on repression and fueling those internal battles become available for you to use for more coherent and conscious behavior. Your discipline then ceases to be a war against your hidden impulses and starts to become a more natural expression of an integrated will. This is an absolutely essential step on the path to an unbreakable discipline. But there is a very subtle trap that many people face, even after they've started the difficult work of integrating the shadow. It's the trap of the persona. Because even with a certain amount of self-knowledge, it's incredibly easy to continue living through a mask, trying to appear disciplined to the outside world, without being truly aligned with your inner self. And it is this very trap that we are going to talk about in the next part. Many people who try and fail, again and again, to build lasting discipline are completely ignoring a decisive factor in their own psychology: the misalignment between their persona and their self. To really get why this gap is so incredibly destructive to your discipline, you first have to understand what these two powerful forces inside you actually are. Let's start with the persona. Think of the persona as a social construct, your collection of masks that you wear to function in the world. It's born from the fundamental human need to adapt to the demands of our environment, our family, our workplace, our culture. From the time we're very young, we learn what kind of behavior is acceptable, what gets us praise, what is socially rewarded. And over time, we develop a specific mask, a social identity that's carefully built to gain acceptance and, just as importantly, to avoid rejection. This isn't necessarily a conscious lie or some kind of malicious deception. It's a fundamental, adaptive mechanism that we all need for human coexistence. You have a work persona, a family persona, a first date persona. They help you navigate different social situations effectively. The problem isn't having a persona. The problem is when the persona crystallizes, when it becomes a rigid prison that you can't escape. This happens when you over-identify with the mask, when you forget that you are the one wearing it, and you start to believe that you are the mask. When this happens, you lose contact with yourself, the authentic, vibrant core of your psyche. The self includes not just your conscious mind, but all the deep, unconscious elements of your true nature. To put it simply, the persona is who you pretend to be. The self is who you actually are. Now, what happens when you try to build discipline from the persona? The result is always an artificial, fragile, and ultimately unsustainable discipline. You're not acting in harmony with your deepest motivations. You are trying to prop up an image. You commit to routines, goals, and behaviors that serve this social mask, the disciplined person, the productive high achiever, the successful entrepreneur. But because this discipline isn't coming from an authentic alignment with your true self, sooner or later, the effort becomes completely exhausting. Maintaining this mask requires a colossal amount of psychic energy. Think of it like being an actor on stage 24 hours a day, never allowed to break character. Every small deviation from your idealized persona, skipping a workout, eating a piece of cake, feeling unmotivated, is perceived as a catastrophic threat to your self-image, and by extension, your social value. This creates a toxic internal environment of anxiety, rigidity, perfectionism, and guilt. These are states that absolutely drain your willpower and make you incredibly vulnerable to self-sabotage. Furthermore, when your disciplined behavior doesn't truly resonate with the authentic values, desires, and needs of yourself, your unconscious mind will eventually rebel. It starts to send up distress flares in subtle forms, a chronic lack of motivation, a persistent feeling of emptiness, a profound loss of meaning in what you're doing. You might feel bored, restless, or find yourself drawn to destructive impulses. This is your psyche desperately trying to restore the balance that's been broken. It's trying to shatter the false image you've constructed so that your true self can finally breathe. And any discipline that is sustained only by a mask simply cannot withstand this kind of internal pressure. On the other hand, when you do the work to align your persona with yourself, discipline becomes a natural expression of your integrated psyche. There's no longer a huge chasm between who you are and who you present to the world. The goals you choose are coherent with your deepest needs, and the habits you form correspond to an authentic sense of purpose. In this state, your psychic energy flows much more freely, and your willpower is constantly reinforced by a powerful feeling of internal congruence and rightness. Achieving this alignment is no small feat. It requires a conscious process of self-knowledge, of deconstructing the unnecessary masks you've been wearing, and of reconnecting with the true aspirations of yourself. But it is an absolutely essential step if you desire a solid, lasting discipline that doesn't depend on constant, exhausting effort just to be maintained. However, even as you begin to align your persona with yourself, there remains a central challenge. There are unresolved internal conflicts still simmering beneath the surface. These conflicts, these clashes between opposing desires and contradictory parts of your own psyche, will continue to persistently undermine your willpower. They create a field of psychic tension that drains your energy, generates fatigue, and makes any attempt at discipline feel like a hard, exhausting struggle. For your discipline to become truly unbreakable, you have to learn how to identify and resolve these internal wars. And that is exactly what we will discuss next. Of all the factors that silently and relentlessly destroy our discipline, internal conflicts are perhaps the most lethal. They are invisible forces that erode your willpower from the inside out. As long as these conflicts remain unrecognized and unresolved, any attempt you make to be disciplined will be permanently weakened, subject to unexpected failures and constant, frustrating relapses. So, what are these internal conflicts, really? They aren't just superficial doubts or moments of indecision. They are deep, fundamental divisions within your psyche itself. They are clashes between opposing desires, between incompatible beliefs, between different parts of your own self that have never been properly integrated. Your ego might consciously want to follow a certain path, to establish a routine, to achieve a goal. But at deeper levels of your psyche, other forces, which are equally legitimate parts of you, may desire the complete opposite. It's like trying to row a boat with only one oar, putting all your effort into moving forward, while an invisible current that you're not even aware of is pulling you in the opposite direction. No matter how hard you row, you just end up spinning in circles, exhausted and frustrated. These conflicts don't just appear by chance. Often, they are the result of a long personal history of repression. They come from unresolved traumatic experiences, from complexes that were formed in childhood, or from unconscious patterns that we inherited from our families. Parts of our psyche can become frozen in time, still carrying emotions and beliefs that are completely at odds with our current, conscious life. For example, your adult, conscious mind might desperately want to be successful and visible. But an unhealed part of you from childhood might carry a deep-seated belief that it's dangerous to be seen, or I don't deserve good things. So when your ego tries to impose discipline without first healing these psychic knots, a powerful resistance appears. It doesn't show up as a conscious, open rebellion. It shows up as chronic fatigue. It shows up as procrastination. It shows up as irritability, self-sabotage, and a complete loss of motivation. The more intense the internal conflict is, the greater the energetic drain will be. It is absolutely critical to understand that your willpower is not an unlimited resource. It's a finite battery that depends on your available psychic energy. And when a significant portion of that energy is being constantly consumed by this internal struggle between opposing forces, there is very little left over to consistently sustain disciplined behaviors. This is the hidden reason behind the classic cycle of burnout. You start a new habit or project with a huge burst of enthusiasm and energy. But within a few weeks, or maybe even days, you feel completely drained, unmotivated, and unable to continue. This is not a lack of character. It is a clear sign that there are unresolved internal conflicts that are draining your life force. Furthermore, these conflicts generate a state of profound emotional instability. They lead to mood swings, a fragmented focus, and a weakened sense of purpose. You feel divided, like you don't have a clear internal axis to orient yourself around. In this state, maintaining discipline becomes almost impossible, because every single action requires a disproportionate and unsustainable amount of effort. The solution is not to simply try to push harder or to apply more productivity techniques. that will only intensify the internal tension and accelerate your burnout. The real path forward is different. It requires you to turn inward, to identify these conflicts, to understand their origins, and to do the work to integrate and resolve them. This is a deep process of self-knowledge and psychic healing. When these internal conflicts are finally dissolved, the psychic energy that was previously blocked and wasted is released. Your willpower is renewed from a deep wellspring, and your discipline begins to flow much more naturally because there is no longer an internal war sabotaging your every move. But there is still one fundamental principle that crowns this entire process. It's the law that connects your inner world to your outer actions. Because even after resolving conflicts, integrating the shadow, and aligning your persona and self, discipline only becomes truly unbreakable when your actions are connected to a deep and profound sense of meaning. And it is this essential law that we will talk about in the next and final part. After everything that has been said so far, after all this exploration into the deep mechanics of the psyche, an essential and powerful truth emerges. No discipline, no matter how well planned or technically structured it is, can ever sustain itself in the long term if it is not connected to a deep and profound sense of meaning for you, the individual. The human psyche is not a machine that operates solely on rational commands and logical inputs. It is a living, breathing organism that is driven by and hungry for meaning. Where there is no meaning, there is no life. And where there is no life, there is no psychic energy to sustain disciplined behavior. This is one of the greatest and most tragic misunderstandings of so many modern productivity approaches. They try to teach people how to be disciplined through purely mechanical methods, through task lists, rigid schedules, time-blocking techniques, and productivity apps. All of this is completely disconnected from the deeper reality of the self. The result is an empty, hollow discipline that feels like a chore and soon runs out of steam. It's because the psychic energy that fuels us, what Jung referred to as libido in its broadest sense, as our fundamental life force, only flows in a sustainable way when it is in service of something that resonates with our true self. It flows when it serves something that makes sense on an existential level, something that touches the most authentic fibers of our soul. When the work you are doing, the habit you are trying to build, lacks this connection to meaning, it becomes arid, monotonous, and heavy. Your willpower feels like a muscle you are constantly forcing, and it quickly wears out. You have to drag yourself through your days. But when there is a deep and powerful connection between your action and your meaning, the energy seems almost inexhaustible. It's no longer necessary to exert this Herculean effort to maintain your discipline. The very flow of your internal life, your passion and your purpose, sustains the movement. Your tasks are no longer just obligations on a to-do list. They become authentic expressions of a broader purpose that you are living out. Therefore, the final step, and perhaps the most decisive one in building an unbreakable discipline, is the conscious pursuit of this alignment with meaning. It is the courage to stop, to get quiet, and to ask yourself with brutal honesty, why am I doing what I am doing? What is the deep, fundamental value that this goal, this habit, this entire routine truly carries for me? And if you can't find an answer, if what you are doing doesn't resonate with anything authentic inside of you, then perhaps it is time to reevaluate your choices. Because no amount of effort, no productivity hack, no amount of pure willpower can ever compensate for the soul-crushing absence of meaning. This is the path that leads not only to a stronger, more natural discipline, but to a fuller, more coherent, and more truthful life. It leads to a life in which your daily behaviors are not just mechanical repetitions you force yourself to perform, but are authentic, vibrant manifestations of an integrated and conscious self. Now that you have understood these 7 psychological laws that support an unbreakable discipline, from moving beyond mere willpower and integrating our unconscious to reconciling with our rejected self, walking the path of individuation, confronting our shadow, aligning our persona with ourself, resolving our internal conflicts, and finally, connecting our actions to a deep source of meaning, it is time for you to reflect. Which of these laws resonated most powerfully with you? As you were listening, where did you feel that inner nudge? Where do you feel you still need to do the deeper work in your own process? Go ahead and leave your comment below. Sharing your insights is a powerful way to consolidate what you've learned and to inspire others who are on this exact same journey. And of course, if this content has been valuable to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and continue watching the upcoming videos. They are all designed to be essential pieces in deepening this journey of self-knowledge and transformation. Don't miss out. Each piece of this knowledge is important,